Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to announce our premiere show, podcast about living with multiple sclerosis and autoimmune disease, or for that matter, any other challenging mental or physical illness. And that combined with being a Bitcoin maximalist, a hard money enthusiast, it's how I view the world with an autoimmune disease through the eyes of a Bitcoiner. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. We hope to have a lot of great guests. Today, I've been lucky enough to call our guest today, Dana, a friend for over 30 years. And she's been a rock solid friend for over 30 years, but my guess is she's been more rock solid to Pete Frates and the Frates family. And that's what we're going to discuss today. I'm going to turn the mic over, or I'm going to talk with Dana about Pete's challenges with ALS, how he fought it, and what he did to improve not only his life, but the people around him in the community of ALS and other people struggling with such physical and mental challenges. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dana, and I'm going to ask her to tell us a little bit about herself, how she got here, and then we'll start digging into sort of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge conversation. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Jeff. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm
of
honored
course.
to be here with you. I've always been honored to be in every endeavor you've had.
Well, the more you say that stuff, the more I'm going to be around you. So,
That's good.
Anyway, so do you want to tell us a little bit about your background, maybe what you do for hobbies, work, and then we can sort of delve into the ALS stuff.
Sure. Currently, I am on my own as a personal stylist and wardrobe consultant. That was born from being an artist and having designers as grandparents, tailors as grandparents. I went to the MFA school, studied in Florence. It's kind of come full circle. I've been in and out of nonprofit. Just telling you guys earlier that this is very close to my old office, WGBH. So it's really nice to be here, and it's kind of a full circle moment for me. So thank you.
All right, well, once again, thank you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and obviously feel free to share with what you're comfortable with. I don't want to invade on any personal circle that you have there. But do you specifically remember when you got the information that Pete was diagnosed with ALS?
I do. I remember the minute, the phone call, and well, we got the diagnosis. Okay, what is it? Pete has ALS. What's that? That's what we said. That's what I said. That's what we all said.
Yeah, I'm sure, because it's so incredible to hear those words come from someone's mouth. Can you? I from doing a little bit of work and looking at some of the stuff out there, can you share maybe how the story behind how Pete got injured and thought it was another injury, and then went to the doctor, and then unfortunately ended up down the road of ALS?
Yeah. So he was a star baseball player for BC and in other with other teams. It was I want to say my dates. Forgive me if my dates here, but I believe it was the summer of 2011. He got hit in a baseball game. He got hit with the ball in his left wrist, and Pete, being Pete, went off on his own, didn't really tell anybody the length to which he was researching what was going on. He knew his body really well. He was a star athlete. And it came down to doctor after doctor after doctor. And it was in March of 2012 where it was official that the diagnosis was there. And my sister, Pete's mom, explains that very well in her TED Talk about how it was a process of elimination at the time. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. This is what we have here. So that's kind of how it happened.
And by the way, for the audience, we will post a link to the TED Talk that Dan is referring to. I've watched it, and it was very impactful. And I will have to admit, I had some tears come down my eyes. So I recommend people watching that TED Talk. After the diagnosis, what was Pete's first response, and how did he handle it? Did he go into a shell? Did he go, how did he handle this?
Well, he handled it very, to our surprise. Well, not really a surprise, because Pete was larger than life. Maybe to our own surprise of how we might have handled it if it happened to us, is he said, "What an opportunity we have now." I mean, yeah, it was beyond anything that we could have imagined. He said, "There'll be no feeling sorry for me. There will be no crying. There will be none of that. We have an opportunity to change the world here."
Uh-huh.
And that was his stance from the get-go. And as a 27-year-old kid, we consider a kid, 27, he said, I now know why I was put on this earth, which was one of the most profound things and taught me a lot about him, even though I knew him as a baby. I knew he was special. I always knew he was special. But that just took it to a whole new level for me.
Wow. Absolutely amazing. How did that? It seems that to me that Pete didn't have any room in his body to say, "Woe is me. Why did it happen to me?" Did you see any of that from him, or was it all, "Let's grab the bull by the horns. Let's educate people. Let's find a cure"? Like, did you see any dark times with Pete?
Personally, I did not. I can't speak for his immediate family.
Right.
Pete always wanted to make others around him feel good, no matter how he was feeling. So at family gatherings or whenever we were around him, he was always up and happy and just always made you feel special and seen, as the kids say today. Really made you feel seen on every level and every single time.
Well, what would you say that the biggest impact or impacts that Pete had to your family? In other words, once this diagnosis came about, did it make the family much closer? Did it make more arguing? Did it make you appreciate, just going out and, taking a small walk? Like, what were some of the main impacts that changed the way your family kind of acted?
Yeah. We could talk for hours about that. Primarily for me, it stopped me in my tracks in the trajectory that I was on personally, my own personal struggles, as we all have. It made me really have a perspective on, wait a minute, this is much bigger. This is far bigger, and I'm going to be a better person for him, for my family, for my parents, who are, well, we've just lost my dad, but my mom is 90 years old, so they were, go back 10, 12 years, they were elderly, and the thought of losing their grandchild was not anything that they had ever entertained. Never mind a grandchild. So that's where I had to kind of forget about me and give back to my family everything that they had always given.
I think what you just touched on is extremely important, because I found with my disease and multiple sclerosis, I've had it for over 35 years. So I've gone from running marathons at the beginning of my diagnosis to, unable to walk a tenth of a mile unassisted. It quickly sort of separates the wheat from the chaff throughout everything in your whole life. And similar, I know we're talking about Pete in ALS, but similar to the impact Bitcoin has. For example, when you understand Bitcoin, everything else is nonsense because Bitcoin is truth, and it pretty quickly crystallizes sort of what's meaningful in life and what are the things you should be working on. And it's hard to be around people like that. And I know, in a sense, it wasn't hard to be around Pete, but when you see there's no room for nonsense in the things you're doing because everything is so heightened because you are now looking from a different perspective, whether it's being diagnosed with ALS, MS, or Bitcoin. You pretty quickly don't have room for nonsense, and it's hard because people around you are full of nonsense. So so it's that, and I have found that to be my biggest struggle because I appreciate, and I'm not putting anybody down. I don't wish my disease or Pete's disease on anybody, but it quickly, if you could say there's a benefit to having a disease, that's one of the benefits. And it's been freeing to me to get to this point. I wonder, do you sense anything like that with Pete kind of found freedom and this is what I'm doing and this is my mission and
Yep.
Let's do it?
That is exactly what he taught me that. Pete was a very spiritual guy. And he was very religious guy. He believed in God. And whatever you believe, there's something larger at work here.
Right.
I'm not going to put a definition on that, obviously, but there's something at work here where it's much bigger, and we're here for a fleeting moment in time. Right. And Pete was always looking for his purpose, and where that came from, I'm still not quite sure. He was kind of born, as you referred as well, you felt like you were chosen. We feel like Pete was chosen for this because I don't think God or whoever it is who's holding the reins here, I don't think they choose anybody that can't handle it or can't educate others or can't help make other people's lives better as a result, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, at least that's how we reconcile it, and I'm with you. I feel the same way. So I'm curious as to the Ice Bucket Challenge. I know that's a global, worldwide, famous event that came about because of Pete. Can you tell me how that started, or what was the first one, or how did it go so viral, or how did all that just take off? And then we'll get into how much money and the research and all that stuff. But how did that amazing story actually begin?
Yeah, well, in the sports world, I think Gatorade kind of
right, the dumping of the
yeah, there's always been that element of
right.
creating pain to get through it, right? So it was always kind of there, the action of throwing ice water over your head.
Okay.
So it wasn't like an original idea. What happened with Pete was that there was an individual, I believe his name was Anthony, and again, I'm a little rusty in the specifics here because it's been a bit of time, and,
right.
and there are different stories that have come together. But at any point, the idea of the Ice Bucket Challenge came from an individual, Pat Quinn, in New York, who has since passed as well. He and Pete were around the same age. They were buddies through sports and whatnot, and mutual friends. And when it came to him, Pat said, I know how we can make this really happen. I'm going to hand this to Pete Frates. I'm going to tell Pete Frates about this. Because Pete had this network of people that Pete had, we call them the circles of Pete, and they were all connected. And he said, if we get this in Pete's hands, something's going to happen here.
Wow. Unbelievable. And then, so, not that you could probably put a finger on it, but how did it become viral? Did someone post it on YouTube and wish it to someone else and they just kept going? Or
Pete said, he became our leader. as he always was
Yes.
to everybody else in his life, on his teams, baseball. And he said to the family, he said, okay, now, what was this, 2012? So Facebook at the time was fairly new, only,
Right.
for mainstream. And he said, I want you to like it and share it, like it and share it, like it and share it. And we were like, okay, Pete, whatever you say. And we did.
Wow.
And that was it. There was no plan. This was completely organic. He saw something we didn't.
It's amazing. And I don't have the exact numbers, but I know it's gone global, but is it like 10 million, 100 million views? Like, is there any way to put a finger on it?
Documented, it was a $250 million.
Wow.
But that was what is able to be traced. As a result, there were a lot of private fundraising events, so nobody really knows.
And then, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but that led to, my guess is, a lot of donations and focus on ALS. So do you have any like top line level about how much money they've attributed to the raising of money, through the Ice Bucket Challenge, or its direct impact on any medicines that have been tried or funded or anything like that, the actual clinical outcomes from the Ice Bucket Challenge that actually has impacted the real world?
Yes, there are 3 drugs, and I'm going to refer to my notes so that I get this right, because this is not my specialty, it's my sister's, so we can...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so there are 3 drugs that have been approved, and 2 of which were a direct result from the funding of ALS. I mean, of the Ice Bucket Challenge. Sorry, there was one in the 1990s that was far beforehand, Rilatech. In 2017, it was Radicava, and in 2022, it was Rilaverio. And they can all be used together as building blocks. The last 2, they were put through the FDA system very, very quickly. Pete had gone in front of the FDA to plead to get these things approved much quicker than the FDA normally does. Now, the ins and outs of that, I'm not sure.
Do you know, again, like maybe 10 years ago, if you got diagnosed with ALS, my guess is you had probably around a 5-year life expectancy.
2 to 5.
2 to 5. Do you know if that number or time frame has changed, increased, decreased?
Well, with these drugs, there has been a percentage. If taken at the appropriate time, if you catch it soon enough, it was too late for Pete.
Okay.
I believe 30%, they extend life by 30%, or they slow down the progress.
The slowing down, like with my disease too, the slowing down of the disease is the key.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's important. What does the family do now to keep Pete's memory or keep him in the family circle right now? Like, do you do once a year we do X, or every night before dinner we say Y? Like, are there rituals or things that you do to keep Pete within your family?
Sure. Well, he's always there at
of course,
everywhere, every day. In the fundraising process, when Team Freight Train was developed, we had 4 main events a year for fundraising. Currently, there's one that has continued and will continue on, and it's a golf tournament every August. And Pete's brother, Andrew, who was his caretaker for many, many years, runs that. And every year it's a sellout. My sister and her family started the Frates Family Foundation,
right?
Whereby what they do at this point, what was very important for Pete and his family was for him to be able to stay at home.
Yes.
This is a huge piece of this, and I know that you understand it. For him to stay at home with his diagnosis and what was to come with it, and that costs an inordinate amount of money. By the love of his friends, and one of his friends, they have a construction company, and they redid the entire section of my sister's home to make everything handicap accessible. Things like this. But knowing full well that not everybody is able to raise the funding that we did for whatever reasons, timing. It's just not in the cards for whatever the reason. My sister's family created the Frates Family Foundation, which now raises funding to give to families that have been diagnosed with ALS that would like to keep their loved one at home.
Right. Wow.
So I quickly touched on once you get a diagnosis that impacts your life like that so stunningly, you quickly kind of reshuffle your whole friend network and family network to people that are really going to be there to support you. And it kind of makes life easier in a sense because you really narrow down who your network is and who your supporters are. Because a big thing I realized was being around people that were either negative or gossipy or just a bunch of noise, no signal. You can't handle that physically and mentally. Being in a state of physical and mental challenge, you cannot handle those people. It's not healthy. So you quickly sort of weed out who's good for you and who's not good for you. Did you see any of that with Pete immediately, or?
Yes. For me personally, it happened quite organically. People just fell off, and the people that I thought would have been there weren't. And then I was pleasantly surprised by people that were there for us that I hadn't had. It was just very surprising for me to see who showed up.
So my guess would be you've lost some friends, but you've gained many other newcomers and new friends into the network. That would be my guess.
Yes, and I think to the defense of those people that weren't there, I think it's a lot to handle. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to take on, and people are limited, right? People can only handle what they can handle, and we have to accept that and not be angry about it. Just know.
Well, I agree. I don't harbor any anger for people like that. Everyone's got stuff going on in their world. Just because I got diagnosed with something or Pete, it doesn't mean your whole world should stop.
Right.
So it's just more of kind of finding the right people to take the journey with.
Exactly. And it's not to say that, believe me, Pete, we were angry. I don't mean to make any reference that we weren't angry, and there weren't very difficult emotional times. Yeah. I mean, that goes without saying.
Right. Is there anything else I'm missing? Any message that I'm not getting out coming from Pete, or what Pete would want us to think about or know? Or how about also other families that might be listening to this that either have been diagnosed with ALS or similar? Do you have any sort of suggestions, recommendations, how to handle it? You know, like, for example, just take a deep breath and you'll get through it, or you'll adapt, or make sure you go to the best doctor in the world. Like, do you have any suggestions? I know it's hard and you're not going to have a magic answer, but what would you say to a family that just got diagnosed with this?
Yeah, that's a difficult question.
Yeah.
Because everybody's reaction is going to be different, obviously. But I guess if I were able to give any kind of advice, it would be to turn inward and say, what can I do to help?
What do you do personally to maintain sort of your joyous outlook on life and to keep yourself sane with all the challenges your family has had to go through? Like, do you meditate every day? Do you do yoga? Do you drink a lot? Like, what do you do to to try
I
to.
have been known to have to drink. Yes, I have.
Well, that might be a different podcast, but right now it's fine.
um, you know, it's speaking of the whole drinking thing. You know, what do they say? One day at a time, right? Well, I think with everything that's gone on, I think we're down to 1 minute at a time.
Yeah.
Not even an hour. I mean, 1 minute at a time. I think to try to tell someone to stay present is just far too vast. Because what does that actually mean? All that means to me, and it's been through a lot of work. Yeah, it's been through a lot of looking in and how do I get better and how am I better for other people, and every single minute of every single day is a gift. It sounds so crazy and so trite, but you now know this, or you've known this now for 35 years. It takes something this big sometimes for people to really digest that idea.
Yeah. I completely understand and I completely agree. I'm trying to figure out how I get people to get the appreciation that Pete has in your family, me and my family, without having to actually be sick. That would be the best.
Well, I don't, yeah, I don't, I think a major challenge needs to happen in people's lives in order for them to grow.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if life is too easy, A, it would be boring.
Yeah.
And B, what would we learn?
No, I agree. I agree completely. Like I say to my kids, it's not a bump in the road, guys. Life is a bumpy road. Don't start. You're going to get challenges your whole way through. So this is a bump in the road. Life is a bumpy road. And so to tie it back to Bitcoin a little bit, because most people do not see any correlation, but I do.
Please explain.
Because of the frenetic pace people are involved in the world today, working 2 or 3 jobs, working just to pay the bills, working paycheck to paycheck, it's because of the theft of inflation by our central banks. And so the people are so consumed with getting on this gerbil wheel and never getting off, that they don't have time to think and appreciate what we just talked about. So that's why Bitcoin's important. Bitcoin, for the first time in the history of mankind, gives us a tool to put our savings, our labor, our hard-earned money that we trade our time for into a savings technology that will not be deflated. And once you have that, it gives you the power to start thinking about other things and having a much lower time preference. Everyone today is running around trying to pay their bills. Oh my God, the groceries are 30% more gas, all this stuff, and they have no time for anything else. And it's not their fault. It's the way our society is. But Bitcoin allows you to trade your labor for money and then put it in a savings technology that cannot be debased, confiscated. And that's why Bitcoin's important. I think the more people use Bitcoin and the more people get on a Bitcoin standard, the more they'll be able to think about the community, think about their family members, think about other people, and think about how to improve mankind. So that's where I see the correlation. And I'm open to anyone who doubts what I just said. I'd be happy to rebut that with them.
Well, I'm a slow learner when it comes to Bitcoin. I've watched you a few times and trying real hard, but it's a concept that takes some time, and I think it's because of the systems that we've had in place. It's tough for us to shift our thinking to that.
It's very, very hard. So I just wanted to throw that in there, maybe to get some wheels turning.
Yeah.
I know people that have facing terrible diagnoses, whether it's ALS or cancer or any other tragic disease. The last thing they're thinking about is Bitcoin. But I will say it gives people strength and confidence. And I recommend people sort of getting as much information as they can. Um,
So, in your perspective, with the amount of time and you've spent with the subject of Bitcoin, I'm extremely limited. But when do can you project a time frame that this will be? I mean, we're talking about one specific type of.
Cryptocurrency.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bitcoin, correct.
Yeah. So it's the major one. So when do you see that actually replacing? Like, how far away are we talking, in your opinion?
Again, it's only my opinion, but you've asked an
The
unanswerable,
$1 million question.
an unanswerable question. But it depends on who you ask and where they are and where they live and what they see.
Okay.
So today, in countries, in developing countries, third world countries, Venezuela, Lebanon, Syria, Africa, Nigeria, those people today understand and adopt Bitcoin immediately. They're using it every day as their lifeboat. In the US and in Western countries, we have the benefit of having the money printer on our side.
Right.
We don't feel any pain. We don't see a need for Bitcoin.
See, you just flipped the script on me because I thought it was the exact opposite.
Well, and the reason why you thought it was the exact opposite, my guess, is because you listen to the mainstream narrative. The mainstream narrative is Bitcoin is poison, Bitcoin's a joke, Bitcoin wastes energy. It's the opposite. The mainstream, the higher-ups, the elite, the government, does not want Bitcoin to win because for the first time in history, it separates money from state. And they will never give that up. Just like the church used to protect the information flow back in the day.
Right.
But then something called the Gutenberg Press got invented, and they lost control of information. And we're in a similar state right now with money and Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is going to win. Empires do crumble. Just read history. We are at the end of our empire of the U.S. I can go into many different things that back that up, like the fourth turning, Ray Dalio's long-term debt cycle. There's a million things that back this up. And here we are today, and Bitcoin's winning. So one of the mistakes people make is to value Bitcoin by its price. Now, when I say value of Bitcoin by its price, I'm talking in U.S. dollars. And my premise is that you're evaluating Bitcoin from a fiat currency. It's useless. So there's other ways to see that the value of Bitcoin is increasing. So you need to look at the adoption rate of Bitcoin. You need to look at the hashing power of the network, which is at an all-time high. You need to look at how many wallets hold 0.1 or 1 Bitcoin in them. I can go on and on and on of other metrics that you use to see the value of Bitcoin, that it's a thriving, growing exponentially, not linearly, exponentially. And our minds can't process what growing exponentially is. I mean, Jeff Booth in his tremendous book, Price It Tomorrow, I don't know the exact words, but he talks about folding a piece of paper, something like, sorry, Jeff, if I get it wrong, I am going to get it wrong because I don't remember, but something like folding a piece of paper 80 times, and how big would that be? And most people say, 3 inches, 5 inches, because our brains can't process exponential growth. And if you fold that paper 80 times or 70 times, it's to the sun, I think it was. So we have no way of measuring the growth and adoption of Bitcoin right now in our just regular fiat brains. And another great thing Jeff Booth talks about, he said, you can't measure a system from within the system. So everyone's measuring it. They have recency bias. They have everything biased. They're measuring from the fiat world and the fiat system. And no one knows how big this is going to get. And anyone who tells you they know when, a day at a time, there's no idea. All I know is when I look at the metrics on all the other non-US dollar monetary basis, on hash rate, on adoption rate, on who's holding the Bitcoin, how much they're holding, on how much Bitcoin has moved over the past years, or the other way to talk about it is how little Bitcoin has moved over the past 12 months. It's something like 60 or 70% of all the Bitcoin are in cold storage, not moving. Those are all signs that show me the growth of Bitcoin. So it's going to happen. We're going to have a big battle with the Western world because they're not going to want to give up the power over money. But it's going to happen. And the more we can educate people and get them into this lifeboat, the fiat money system is sinking. We're at the end game of it, whether it's 1 year or 10 years, it's sinking. And we need to transfer over to a new monetary system. And luckily, Satoshi Nakamoto has discovered and invented Bitcoin.
It gave me an awful lot to think about. And like anything else, though, right? When you had asked me what was my initial reaction when we heard the diagnosis of Pete, right? He has ALS. Well, what the heck is that? What is it? Now I know more than I want to know, probably. But so a similar, take the time. You got to dedicate the time to learn.
Highly recommend you researching this a little bit. And then once you go down, I've never met anyone that's gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and has come back to me and say, Jeff, you're out of your mind. You're still out of your mind. Every person I've told to go and research this has come back to me and thanked me. It's a true story.
So I have a question, being a little old school. Cash is king. What do you say about that?
Unfortunately, right now, cash is king because because we're in the midst of chaos. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Having the funds to do what you want in life is king. Yes, cash right now gets less than 1% in the bank, getting eaten away by at least 10% inflation. I don't know. Is cash king? If you with inflation at 9% in 7 years. Think about this. 7 years with inflation at 9%, we know it's higher than that. You lose half your purchasing power. 50% of your in the United States today. This is ongoing. This is how the elites do it. This is how they do the money transfer. This is how they steal from the workers of Slavelandia. I'll steal a line from Gerald Celente. This is how they do it. You work for 7 years, and half of that money gets eaten away in purchasing power, not in actual dollars. You still have $20,000 or whatever it is, but that $20,000 will buy you 50% of what it did 7 years ago. And then you pay the other 50% in taxes. That's where we are. 7 years, you lose all your money.
So again, coming from ignorance, the next question may be really simple. So there's no inflation with Bitcoin?
That's right. There's a very small inflation right now. It's called the stock to flow, meaning how much new issuance is coming. There's something called the halving in Bitcoin. Every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's mined gets cut in half. Halving's in about 2 years from now. It's going to get cut down to 3-point-something Bitcoin a day. In 2140, there'll be no more Bitcoin mined, and there will be zero inflation at that point. So there's a very small inflation rate right now. It's going to be less than gold pretty soon. But it is programmed into the software that there's a 21 million hard cap of Bitcoin. So it is the best savings and spending tool mankind has ever known. And the reason why the government doesn't like it is they can't control it, they can't confiscate it, they can't inflate it. All their games, all their fiat games are over on a Bitcoin standard. So it takes many hours to research and understand this, but what I'm saying is factual. And if you did the research, you would understand.
I'd like to hear you talk about it because you make it palpable. Because for someone like myself who, I'm an artist. I went to Tufts, a liberal arts college. For me, right. The whole financial thing is,
that's what most,
as it is now, is a mystery to me.
But that's how the government wants it. They want you to go to school. They want you to get in debt. They want you to take out school loans. They want you to take out car loans. They want you to take out mortgage loans. They want you in debt So you will be a good little sheep.
Mission
You will,
accomplished.
you will go to work. You will pay. You will try to work to pay your bills, and that's it. Do you have anything else you want to add, or I'm pretty much all set? We can wrap it up. I have a gift for you that I'd like to give you, but
I have a gift for you too.
like mine's great minds think alike. Well, Dana,
Thank you so much. How's it look?
looks great.
Yeah, I like the color. You know that Pete's favorite color was orange.
Is that right?
So
He was a Bitcoiner.
there's a lot of orange in my life. I bet you
Awesome.
Pete would have jumped right on that
Oh my God.
bandwagon.
Don't get me going. That's unbelievable.
Seriously. And this one is for you. This was our original T-shirt. Pete's number was number 3, and that's another way that we honor him. Tend to do things in threes and notice. Be open to the signs. It's a magical number.
Well, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it, and I will truly value it. So, Dana, so I don't know, do you have some social media you want people to follow you on about this, or?
You did remind me that I have a Twitter account, which did start with Pete.
Okay.
So there's stuff there.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and all your knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome.